Everybody, great to be back with you again. This is Seahawk boy Mike. There we go. Let's fix that. Not Brian Engelman. Didn't check one last thing. Uh Seahawk boy Mike B. There we go. Okay. Um anyway, nice to be back with you guys again for another quickie Seahawks live stream here. There's something interesting that came up and I thought it was worth discussing, which is that there appears to be now some sort of controversy over whether or not there should be a quarterback competition in Seattle. And there are people on both sides. There are people saying, "Oh no, Geno Smith has won the job. He should, Howell was brought in here to be a backup." And there's other people saying something completely different. So what I thought we would do is go over some of the pros and cons, some of the arguments about whether there should be a direct quarterback competition in Seattle or not. And I'll give you a hint right now. The short answer is yes. All right, everybody, welcome back. Seahawk Boy Mike here with you with another update, another new edition of Seahawk Boys TV. Great to be with you guys from beautiful but windy Las Vegas, Nevada. It's going to cool down here for a couple days, and there's a big cold front coming in, so we're going to get lots of wind. Got to get my dog out, get him to the park real quick. Okay, so an issue came up, and it was discussed a little bit on Twitter yesterday, fairly widely, actually. And the question was simply, should there be a quarterback competition for the starting job in Seattle? And, again, I think there's some straight up logic you can apply to this, first of all, which is if if Sam Howell coming into his third year is not good enough to beat out Geno Smith for the starting quarterback's job with the Seattle Seahawks in 2024, what did you trade for him for? Why is he here? What is the point of even having him? And why didn't you draft a quarterback like Spencer Rattler in the 4th or the 5th round, which is what you should have done in this last draft, as we've covered over and over again in previous videos? And the answer to that's pretty straightforward. He better be, because if Sam Howell isn't good enough by his 3rd year in the NFL, 2nd year competing for a starting job to beat out Geno Smith, he's not good enough to win you a Super Bowl, which means you should have gone and gotten a quarterback in the draft, and which means you made a mistake by trading for him. So here we are, and let's try to figure this out and sort it all out. It all started yesterday with a tweet from Hawks. What is it? Hawks Mania. One of my not really favorite, but he's a good Seahawks Twitter guy that I like. And he came out and he said Jim Nagy, a former Seahawks scout and current Senior Bowl executive director, hopes that the Yearsome quarterback, that's as bad as me having Engelman's name on there, that the quarterback, that this year the quarterback competition opens up the opportunity for Sam Howell. He said, I really hope they open it up. He said said Nagy, who was an NFL scout for 2 decades. I hope it's an open competition, similar to like when they had Russell and Matt Flynn. And I was with the Chiefs when Russell came in at Kansas City in the preseason and lit us up. I would love to see a legitimate open competition and see where this thing comes out, because I think Sam's a starting quarterback in the league. We all hope so. I give Seattle a lot of credit that they went out and traded for a guy that they thought highly of through the draft process. Nagy said, you've got a guy who's younger than some of these QBs that were in this draft class, who's got all this game experience. I'd just love to see him with a better supporting cast. And I'm not sure, but I think that may have come from the interview Nagy did with Rob Staten a couple days ago over on Rob's YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below and always is highly recommended to listen to. So, okay, let's take all that and kind of absorb it and think about it a little bit. He has a high opinion of Sam Howell. I don't, because I've seen him play. And I've seen all the interceptions he threw, which were terrible. And I feel like you're going to have to take a year to untrain him from all the mistakes that he's made and all of the pressure and all of the screw ups he's had in the last couple of years. No, Glenn, the Seahawks, do they have a quarterback? I don't know. Do they? They haven't had one since 2021. We know that really well. They had Geno. Geno had a good 2022. So then the question is, should Geno Smith just be given this starting job, or should he have to fight for it? And, there are quarterbacks who you don't question. You don't question Mahomes. You don't question Joe Burrow. You don't question Justin Herbert in San Diego. You don't question that they're the starting quarterback. And it's actually kind of an insult to bring somebody in to compete with them. So you don't do that. But Seattle has always had this thing under the Pete Carroll era of always compete. Now that was a Pete Carroll thing. Always compete. Every job's open, and we don't know what Mike Macdonald's going to do with that. Macdonald might feel that questioning Geno, putting pressure on him, where the quarterback competition isn't the best thing to get the maximum performance out of Geno Smith. Now that is a philosophy that some NFL teams and coaches would take. It is a failed philosophy, in my opinion, because look, if you're not good enough to stand up to this young guy coming in trying to take your job, you're not good enough to win us a Super Bowl. It's that simple. If that pressure is too much for you, you're not going to play good against the 49ers. You're not going to be able to make up a 37-3 deficit to Mike Macdonald's Ravens like from last year. You're simply not going to be good enough. So everybody should have to compete for their jobs at all times. The NFL should be, and used to be, and maybe still is, a meritocracy. So then the question becomes, okay, but hasn't Geno earned enough credit with the Seahawks to justify not having to compete for the starter's job? And I think the answer has to be no to that. I bet you're surprised that I came up with that answer. But I think the answer is no. And the reason why is that Geno had a great year in 2022, and then he had a considerable drop-off in 2023. And we're going to kind of go through that and take a look at it. But also there's another thing that's really important to consider, which is that Geno, excuse me, Geno also has the highest cap hit of any player on the Seahawks team. He's at $26.4 million right now. And for 2025, he's going to be even higher, $38.5 million. I'm just going to tell you right now, at age 35, Geno Smith is not going to have a $38.5 million cap hit. I mean, if you cut him in 2025, you go from 309, you go from what, about 663,000 over the cap to 24.3 million under it. So that's pretty much guaranteed. Now, what Geno could get himself is, if he plays really great, is he could get himself a new deal of some kind that would be with a much better cap hit for 2025. But he's going to have to really play his balls off in order to do that. So let's take a look at Geno's stats the last couple of seasons. As a starter in 2022, he played really, really well. He had a 69.8% completion percentage, threw for 82 yards. People say, oh, well, that's a team record. It's only a team record because he played an extra game. And it was in that extra 17th game that the record was broken. So Russell Wilson still has a single season yardage record for the Seattle Seahawks. He threw 30 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, almost a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and a 100.9 quarterback rating. All of that is really good and really acceptable. I consider these, well, not yards, but I consider most of these stats to be the crucial ones when evaluating a quarterback. But what I told everybody last week and last year, and again, I'm literally like the only guy out here saying this last year. I told everybody in Seahawks Twitter land and Seahawks YouTube land that Geno Smith was guaranteed to decline in 2023. Why? Because if you look at the video that's linked below in the description, Geno Smith is not a unicorn. I'm going to remind you that no career journeyman quarterback who had his best year, his career year, past the age of 30 has ever repeated that level of performance ever. Even elite quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Drew Brees, once they hit their top years in their 30s, they were never able to get back to that level. So I told everybody, and don't tell me Rich Gannon. Rich Gannon had a couple of decent years, and then he had his MVP year, which, by the way, was not even as good, really, is about the same as Jared Goff's 2022 season. It wasn't an MVP year. That award was a joke. But after that, John Gruden exposed him in the Super Bowl, and Rich Gannon fell off the face of the earth and was out of football 2 years later. So it simply doesn't happen. And it wasn't going to happen with Geno. Now, the question is, can Geno bounce back to that 2022 form in 2024? It's not likely with him turning 34 years old. It's just not very likely. So that is a reason why I have been pounding the table for the last 3 off seasons to get a young, talented quarterback in here. And his name isn't Sam Howell. Now, Howell may yet prove us all wrong, may prove me wrong. I certainly hope he does, because I'm a Seahawks fan first and foremost. But I think it's possible Geno comes relatively close to his 2023 numbers, but not probably ever getting back to 2022. So, when you think about this, there are a few stats that I think are important. I think completion percentage is an important stat when evaluating quarterbacks. I think yards is kind of an important stat, but actually yards per catch, to my mind, is more important than yards. I mean, just gross yards doesn't mean anything. You don't score any points for yards unless you play fantasy football. And that's why all these stupid fantasy geeks, oh, well, look at how many yards, he threw for more yards than Russell Wilson last year. Well, it only matters in fantasy. What matters with a quarterback is touchdowns in the air and on the ground. Does he run for touchdowns? Does he throw for touchdowns? How many? What's his touchdown to interception ratio? So touchdowns is critical. Touchdown to interception ratio, I think, is the key, along with passer rating, to evaluating a quarterback. So people have argued with me about that. There are people that say, well, Geno's QBR was better than Russell Wilson's last year. Well, okay, his passer rating wasn't. And his QBR didn't go down very much. It was about the same. No, it doesn't bode well for Mr. Rogers, Glenn. That's true. It's true. Aaron Rodgers is unlikely to get back to that top level. We'll see if Aaron Rodgers is a unicorn. We'll see if he can come back from that injury and be a great player. But QBR is not a real stat. It is not a real metric. Passer rating is a legit metric. Why? Well, QBR is a joke. QBR was invented by ESPN to try to come up with a, quote, better system than the NFL's passer rating to evaluate quarterbacks. The problem is it's pretty ludicrous. This is an article from Mike Florio over at Pro Football Talk in 2015. And he just came in and he said, look, there's a risk of beating a dead horse when you talk about QBR, ESPN's proprietary statistic that was rolled out with great fanfare 4 years ago as the one stat that measures the totality of a quarterback's performance. I said plenty about QBR last week, but perhaps no more needs to be said. But today I decided to dig a little deeper into what is, according to QBR, the greatest game any quarterback has ever played. Charlie Batch's 186-yard, 2-interception performance against the Buccaneers in 2010. Really, under all-time best games on ESPN's QBR page, the top game on the list is an utterly forgettable game that Batch played in place of the suspended Ben Roethlisberger in 2010. I couldn't comprehend how 186 yards and 2 interceptions could add up to the greatest game ever played with a 99.9 QBR on a scale of 0 to 100. But then again, I didn't remember exactly what Batch did in that game, and I know ESPN claims that QBR benefits from tape analysis that includes dropped passes and performance under pressure. Yeah, because that's a measurable real metric, right? And other things that traditional stats overlook. So I decided to rewatch Batch's game and see how it looked. Thanks to NFL.com's Game Pass, it's easy to go back and watch old games, so I did. And what I saw was not the greatest game any quarterback had in NFL history. Not even close. I'm sure Charlie Batch doesn't think it was the greatest game in NFL history. I'm sure Charlie Batch's mom doesn't think it was the greatest game in NFL history. No sane person could possibly think it was the greatest game in NFL history. Only ESPN's super secret QBR formula could possibly arrive at the conclusion that it was the greatest game in NFL history. Okay, so I don't want to beat a dead horse here either. But you know, don't come at me with that QBR shit. QBR is a joke. And what I will tell you again is going back to Geno's stats. What I will tell you again is what I've said before, which is that you can say anything you want about passer rating. What NFL statistics do, and and I think touchdown to interception ratio should be listed in their standard stats you can get on ESPN and so forth. Like if you go over to ESPN's passer stats for 2023, they have a lot of information, but they don't have touchdown to interception ratio, which I think is really important. But I'm going to say this again because it's true, and I want everybody to really absorb it. I have never seen a quarterback have a great game and have a terrible passer rating. I have never seen a quarterback have a shit game and have a great passer rating. It's consistently accurate in terms of the perceived performance of a player, of a quarterback on a given day. And for that reason, it is a valuable stat. Other stats that I think are important that are kind of overlooked is toxic differential, which is Brian Billick's stat that he came up with in 2010 or 2012, started talking about it, which you can't hardly really find anywhere. Toxic differential is explosive plays given up versus explosive plays generated. And I think that's a really critical thing to evaluate team stats. So, okay, so let's look at, Geno's stats. And again, what you see is that in 2023, he took a marked decline. In 2022, his completion percentage was 69.8. In 2023, it declined to 64.7. His yards, again, which I don't think is that important, declined from 4282 to 3624. So he dropped off by about 700 or 800 yards. His touchdowns went from 30 to 20. His interceptions went down slightly from 11 to 9. So that's a slight improvement. And his quarterback rating dropped from 100.9 to 92.1. So now let's go back and let's look at touchdown to interception ratio, which I was just making a big deal out of as being an important metric, an important stat in evaluating quarterbacks. And when you see that, you look for 2023, and Geno's touchdown to interception ratio was 2.22. It's pretty good. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, about 17th, 16th, 13th, 14th in the NFL. Notice how far behind Russell Wilson he is. Russell Wilson has one of the greatest touchdown to interception ratios in NFL history. I believe he's in the top 10, 5 or 10 on that. Fantastic. Meaning he doesn't give the ball away. He throws a lot of touchdowns, doesn't give the ball away. You also might notice that Justin Fields has a slightly better touchdown interception ratio than Sam Howell. Justin Fields is 1.78 to 1, meaning he throws almost 2 touchdowns for every interception he throws. Sam Howell's, of course, 21 to 21 was 1 to 1. 2 to 1 is not good enough. 3 to 1, 2.5 to 1 to 3 to 1 is really good. CJ Stroud's 4 to 1 is fucking phenomenal. 4.6 to 1 is fucking phenomenal, as is Dak Prescott's 4. That's amazing. Anything over 3 to 1 is amazing. Now, Derek Carr has a 3.13 to 1 ratio, which is really good, but how many touchdowns did he throw? I don't know. Let's go back and look. How many touchdowns did Derek Carr throw? Touchdowns. Derek Carr. Let me show this tab instead. Again, the ratio only matters if you play a lot and throw. Did I miss him? Where is Derek Carr? Where's the little saying go? There it is. He threw 25 touchdowns. So that's a really good ratio, 25 to 8. That's a great year for Derek Carr. You got to give him a lot of credit for that. So other stats that kind of mean something, again, yards don't mean anything to me. Average, which is yards per completion, I think is pretty important. The fact that Brock Purdy not only led the NFL in passer rating and other things, and had a lot of yards and has a 9.6 average shows he's throwing the ball deep and doing a great job. Geno was 13th at 7.3. And where is our other quarterback? I'm looking for a Seahawks logo. Sam Howell, 6.4. That's not very good. That's not really very good. So, and where was Russ, by the way? Just for argument's sake, because everybody's going to bring up Russ. Where was Russ? I must have just gone right past him. Probably everybody else can see it. Russell Wilson, 23rd, 6.9. So that shows you that, again, the air was taken out of the offense in Denver. It was a very short yardage offense. He did not let Russ do what he does best, which is throw the ball deep. So, okay. So we went and looked at Geno's 2023 touchdown to interception ratio, and it was 2.22. Now let's look at his 2023 ratio. Now let's look at his 2022 ratio. It was 2.73. 30 and 11 versus 20 and 9. So he dropped off by a fairly significant margin. So as I went through and looked at it, I found out and went through and did some percentage calculations. And the overall stats, let's go back to Geno Smith's stats. The overall drop in Geno's performance was in completion percentage, he dropped off by 7.3%. In yards, he dropped off by 15.3%. In touchdowns, he dropped off by 33.3%. That's catastrophically bad. Touchdown to interception ratio was a drop off of 18.6%. And in passer rating, he dropped off by 8.7%. So overall, if you average those 5 or 6 most important stats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 key stats that I would use for evaluating a quarterback, it's an overall 14, almost 15% decline. Now, does that mean he's going to decline by 15% again this year? No, it doesn't. But he's going to have a hard time at 34 staying up there. He's going to have a hard time staying up there. And he's got quite a bit of improvement, to get back on track. So getting back to Sam Howell then, and getting back to this tweet, the reality is that there's no point in trading for Sam Howell unless you're going to let him compete for the starting job. And if he can't beat out Geno Smith, who is declining, 14%, almost 15% decline this past season, then he doesn't deserve the starting quarterback's job. He's in his third year. He's a third-year professional. Okay? He's not a rookie. He's not somebody you have to take care of. He's not somebody you have to coddle and nurture. And if he can't compete with Geno Smith, or if Geno Smith can't compete with him, then what are we doing? We don't have the right quarterbacks. And we should have drafted one, either in 2022 or 2023 or 2024. Here's the thing. Schneider supposedly loved Sam Howell. Oh, I love Sam Howell in 2022. Well, why didn't you take him with your 4th round pick then instead of Kobe Bryant, who's probably going to have a really hard time making the 53-man roster? Why didn't you just take him? We'd have 2 years in this system, so we would be able to evaluate whether he was good enough or not. We would already probably know. 2 years in the NFL. So I think we're in a situation now where our only hope is that Sam Howell is good enough, because Geno appears to be on the drop down. So the answer to the question is, should Geno be having forced to fight for his starting job? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Is Sam Howell going to be good enough to beat him out? I don't know. But if he isn't good enough, get rid of him and get rid of Geno and start over next year. Schneider and McDonald were pretty smug in their press conferences this week during Seahawks rookie minicamp. Typical smug Pete Carroll, John Schneider attitude. Oh yeah, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and blah blah blah, and it generally never comes to fruition. So, um, I don't think that's a good sign because I don't think these guys are realistic about where they are. And where they are is that you've got a declining 34-year-old quarterback who's taking up a lot of cap space and is going to take up a massive amount of cap space next year. So you're not going to be able to bring him back unless he has a fantastic year, unless he jumps back to 2022 levels. And here's another point that's really important to think about. Just going back to 2022 levels, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 100.9 quarterback rating, it's not good enough. With all the players around him, with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet and Noah Fant and this new tight end they drafted from Michigan, and with Haynes, with the new guard they drafted, and then Latoa or whatever his name, they're apparently playing him at left guard. The left tackle guy they drafted, they're looking at him as a left guard. And you hear all the usual stuff about how great Byron Murphy looked in shorts yesterday, hitting, tackling sleds, blocking sleds. Great. I'm glad he did. But you're going to have to beat some good teams, Gino. $38.5 million is a pretty massive cap hit. It's not maybe massive by the standards of Dak and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, but Gino's not as good as those guys. Those guys are all capable of winning Super Bowls. So you can't have a cap hit that big for a quarterback who's not good enough. So even if Gino has those kind of stats back, but we don't beat the 49ers and the Rams and the team and any other good teams on our schedules that we have to compete with to win a Super Bowl, if we don't beat some of those teams, if Gino doesn't show that he can do what Russ did on a regular basis, which is beat the best teams in the NFL, you can't bring him back. You can only bring him back maybe if he'll take $9 or $10 million a year to be a backup to Sam Howell or the new guy we bring in. So that's where the pressure point is right now for the Seattle Seahawks. It's at quarterback. And I just wish that they had realized that in 2022, on March 8th, 2022, when they traded away the greatest quarterback this team will ever have, Russell Wilson. Because unfortunately, I think if they don't realize it by now, and there were some disparaging, not really super enthusiastic comments by McDonald and John Schneider about Gino. If they don't realize now that they're in trouble, I got a feeling they're going to realize it a year from now. But a year from now, we don't have a lot of juice. I would have traded out of 16 down to 23 with the Vikings, or taken one of the other deals that was on the table that we've heard so much about. Said that we'd have extra picks next year. We'd have 2/3 and 2/4 next year, plus probably another fourth compensatory pick, fourth and a fifth. So we'd have a first, a second, 2/3, 3/4, and 2/5 next year if they'd taken that deal instead of focusing. Byron Murphy. Got to have Byron Murphy. Yeah, because we're desperate for another 3-tech. Interior 34 defensive lineman. We just got to have that. We got to have the best 3-tech 34 defensive lineman in the NFL. I don't know how that's going to win you any football games. And if Leonard Williams isn't among the top 5 best, why are you paying him $20 million a year and spend a second-round pick on it? Too many things that this regime has done are to avoid embarrassment or tough questions. Fortunately, the Seattle media never asked these guys a fucking tough question. God, I'd love to get a media credential. By the way, can you explain to me what you're going to do at quarterback next year when Gino's cap hit is $38.5 million? What if he doesn't play as well as 2022? I mean, that's the best case scenario as he gets back to 2022. Historically, it's never happened. I don't see how it's going to happen. He probably can get back to 2023, but he's got to get the touchdowns up, and the touchdown to interception ratio's got to get up. if we're going to win games. And he's got to beat some good teams. So either that or Sam Howell has to come in, take the bull by the horns, get out of his shell shock from Washington, from the Redskins experience, and do something for us. If that doesn't happen, we're going to be right back here next year talking about the same shit. How are we going to get a quarterback that can win us a Super Bowl? The answer to that is we should have already had one. We should have already had Purdy or CJ Stroud or Will Levis or even Spencer Rattler, guys who have upside. Justin Fields, who I like. I don't care what anybody else says about him. I think you put good team around Justin Fields, I think he's more effective than Sam Howell. And that's the guy I would have traded for. But to give them credit, Fields apparently had a list of teams that he wanted to go to, a few teams he would be willing to go to, and Seattle may or may not have been on them. We may have made an offer for Fields and been rejected. We don't know. So we got to give him some fair credit on that. Okay, that's it. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And one other little piece that I think is interesting is Tua Tagovailoa is in this rookie camp. The Seahawks are smart. They will sign him and bring him to training camp. Why? Because the little guy can make plays. I watched him in the East-West Shrine game, and he is an innovative, imaginative, play-making little dude. And I think he should be at least the third quarterback on this team. I wouldn't, I mean, let's bring him into training camp and see how he does, because you just never know. But this team needs a guy at quarterback that can make some magic happen. No question about that. Thanks for being with me. We'll come back and do this again soon. And let's just all hope that Geno is either a unicorn or Sam Howell really is the future, even if some of us don't think that he is. Go Hawks.